All right, welcome everybody. Today's episode, we're going to do part two of the breakdown of the first round. In episode one, we did picks 1 to 16. Joined by Tyler again. What's going on?
Hey Dan, how's it going?
Good. So we'll just jump right in here. Pick number 17 is actually me. I got Pat Gomez here. So Pat Gomez, I have as I didn't really love the pick, to be honest. When I picked him, at this point in the draft, a couple of the guys I really wanted went a few spots ahead of me, and I just didn't really love anyone too much, so I was actually considering kind of not signing him, getting my comp pick next year. But he's kind of grown on me. I really like the high currents. He's pretty much the best current hitter in the draft, other than the one first baseman, Sulis. If I looked at my rankings, it's just the 40 current contact and the 40 current home run were phenomenal compared to everyone else. So I feel like he could go into like high A right away and kind of mash and just didn't. Is this like a solid left field type prospect? I just can't really decide, but there's a lot of stuff to like about him, the low bonus and a fly ball hitter and stuff. But yeah, is there anything else you want to add on to Gomez?
Yeah, no, I mean he's crazy developed, right? Good enough. Actually, a pretty solid defender in left field, so I think he'd play well there. And yeah, really long, really far along with his path. So if you do sign him, it's a guy who can start in probably high A or at least A ball. And if he reaches those potentials, that's a major league player for sure. So be interesting to see what the result is, but I think he's a solid pick there.
Yeah, I was just looking on the OSA is quite a bit lower on it. My scout has a 70 hit tool on him, so I don't know if other scouts agree. The OSA only has a 55, but yeah, we'll see. I think for me, like I mentioned earlier to you before the episode, it's just kind of more so about hitting singles and doubles and getting a lot of depth in the organization instead of swinging for the fences on a lot of risky guys. For how little talent I had a couple years ago, I've tried to infuse a bunch of talent and just kind of going safe over ceiling the last couple drafts. So he was another one of those picks. So nothing to get too excited about, but kind of liked him as a pretty safe, pretty good hitter. Next up, we have one of those high ceiling picks. So Kevin Kimball. What can you tell me about the Rays? Kevin Kimball, big time bonus baby here.
Yeah, big time. He's a lefty. He's pretty old for the high school class. He's about to turn 19 here. But he's got some development in his pitches, which is nice to see. I got a 45 fastball. The lowest is the curveball at a 30. All three of those pitches for me coming out is 70 plus. Um, but raw on the rating side, 30 stuff and then 25 in movement control. So he has a long pathway to go. But, I think for a guy already throwing 94 with that potential pitch mix, if he hits that ceiling, that's well worth the bonus.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't afford him, or else I would have probably taken him. It's just my organization doesn't really have any money, so I couldn't afford the 7 mil. But clearly, the most high ceiling guy probably on the board at that point. Pretty monstrous stuff. 75 out of a starter. That's pretty elite. If you look at those ceilings, if he ever got to those, he would be one of the best pitchers in baseball. But one of those picks, you gotta risk it for the biscuit sometimes. Most likely, guys like that are pretty risky. There's probably less than a 50% chance they do turn into superstars, but um, also, you can't get superstars unless you draft guys with those kind of ceilings a little riskier. So I like the balls taking a pick like that. Pretty nice to get a guy like that 17 too. A lot of times, like a guy like that kind of talent will go 7 or 8 in the draft. To be able to get him down at that spot is pretty nice. Pretty nice for the Rays there, especially organization with a lot of talent. Next up, we have David Barrios, another one of those high ceiling, low floor type guys. Very raw, but big time potential there from the young third baseman.
Yeah, I messaged Austin after, Barrios was like the top player on my board at my pick, and I went with Gilvin just feeling it was a little safer, but the potential that Barrios has for me is absolutely insane. 70 potential eye, 65 potential power. He's incredibly raw. I mean, one of the most raw batters we have in the entire draft. So a lot of this is going to come into how he develops and everything, but high leader is always nice. Should play a solid enough third base as well. With those ratings, he could be a really good defensive first baseman if he's that good of a hitter. So, very interested to see how he develops. Like his potential profile a ton, but definitely needs to, as a 19-year-old already, start trending in a more positive direction with the Currents.
Yeah, also the really good outfield ratings too. I got 60 outfield range on him, so can really play all over the diamond. Yeah, just like exactly what you're saying about Kimball. Essentially, with these young high school guys, when they have 20 and 25 currents and like the 60 ceilings, it's just you just got to cross your fingers and hope they develop. If you have good coaches in your system and they get good good success early on really helps, and try and get them to A-ball by the time they're like 20, 21, and just see what happens. So just got to be really patient on those guys. But if you are patient, those guys have pretty high trade value too in a couple of years. So nice nice ceiling out of a guy like that. Pick where he is. Another one of those high school guys going yet again. We got a really big run on high school guys here. I think all the way. Wow. So yeah, we had a run on high school guys all the way from pick 16 all the way down to pick. Geez, like every one of these guys, I don't even know the first
Except for
call.
you.
Which guy? Is I don't
Except
know.
for you.
Yeah, I don't know if Slack is a. But anyways, we'll get to that after. But next up, we have Josh Catalano. Josh Catalano has a pretty neat profile. Another little more developed than Kimball. The ceiling's not quite as crazy as Kimball's a few picks before, but he's a lot cheaper. He's a slot guy that will probably only cost about 4 million. 6'2", a lot of stuff I like about this profile.
Yeah, right. Young too for the class. Just turned. Actually, it's his birthday in game right now, so that's funny enough. But lefty, love that. There's a couple of red flag things with him. You know, the only two pitches that he really has any development in right now are the fastball and the sinker. The 40 stamina is also a little bit of a concern, but the 35 current movement for a high school kid is always great to see. There's some things in him that lend you to think he could turn into a reliever, but he'd be a really good reliever. So be very interested to see how he starts to pitch in rookie ball here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that assessment. I think be pretty elite or reliever there with a high movement and the high fastball sinker. But yeah, that curveball, it's a lot better to have a 25 than a 20. 25 65 is still really risky, but 25 current definitely is quite a bit nicer to see than some of those high school guys only have 20. So as raw as he is, he's not like absolutely ridiculously raw. So really liked a lot of stuff about that profile though. Next up, we have Chris Aragon. Chris Aragon is a really good defender, probably the best defensive player in this entire draft. Really has multiple Gold Glove type potential at center field. Probably turn into an 80 range guy there. Without a doubt, would just be an amazing athlete in high school. Probably one of those guys that could play running back or receiver in football. Just like a elite speed, stealing, base running, all three light blue. So absolutely amazing ceilings and the athleticism department. The bat isn't quite as far, pretty raw, but when you have that kind of defensive ability, you don't need much bat to be good.
Yeah, pretty much everything you just said. I was just picturing like being from Kentucky. He's probably like the greatest thing in the world. There, they've probably never seen an athlete like that. The 75 range with that type of athleticism is incredibly elite. So if he gets to his hip potentials, he's a plug and play center fielder pretty right away. The batted profile isn't great. Ground ball with extreme pull lends you to think he could be kind of a low BABIP guy that's just kind of like a slap hitter. So seeing 30 current home run power is nice. Hopefully that profile turns into normal or line drive, something like that. But elite defensively. Hope the fragile tag doesn't cost him too much. This being that young, but a lot to like about that pick there.
Yeah, it's funny at the time when you compare him, like when I was looking at him in my spot, and you compare the guys, the bat doesn't seem too great. But then once you get used to looking at the second, third round talents, and all of a sudden that bat looks, it's like, oh, that's actually not bad. 55 and 45. It's just, yeah, when you group it in with those big bats that go in the first round, it doesn't seem super sexy at the time. But still, like you said, a pretty somewhat high contact guy. Like for that good of defense to have 65 avoid K I got and 55 contact, that's actually really safe. Just probably never really have any extra base ability, but should be able to hit singles at a pretty good clip, especially with that high base running. So we'll see how he turns out. But even though it's weird to say safe with a guy that low of a bat and like a fragile tag, but when it comes to defense being such a sure thing, it's actually a pretty safe pick. Worst case scenario, you'd think he'd develop into like it's pretty solid like fourth outfielder. It's like an elite defensive replacement. So kind of like that pick for Boston there for sure. Next up, we have Freddie Osborne, another high school guy here. So Osborne goes to the Tigers. He was a pretty amazing ceiling bat. What do you think about that eye he has?
Yeah, he challenges Barrios for being the most raw hitter in this draft. It's a ton of potential here. 70 potential eye for me from a switch hitter is beautiful. So if he hits that's an elite profile. Good athlete, not anything crazy to speak of in terms of a defender, but can play left field and survive out there. Really just had a crazy senior season in high school. Just absolutely blew away any of the numbers he had before that. So a guy who seems to be progressing pretty well, but does everything pretty well. You know, you want the contact to come along a little bit to kind of match that profile, but like him a lot as a potential left fielder if all of those get to 50 with that elite eye.
Yeah, just really, really nice athleticism too. Not too many guys that have 60 power and 60 gap power, 55 type bat that have that kind of speed and stealing. So pretty nice athlete from a left fielder there. We'll see how he develops, but yeah, with that good of an eye, usually those guys are pretty safe because they can always just kind of get on base. But yeah, it is yeah, another one of those raw high school guys for sure here in a draft full of them. Next up for the Cubs, we have Danny DeJong. Danny DeJong is one of the only pitchers to go so far in a position player heavy draft. You again, he's a young guy, but he's actually got really developed pitches. Really like the pitch mix he has. The changeup's a little bit young, which all high school arms are, but a nice kind of movement, kind of like the Catalano profile quite a bit, but an extra pitch.
Yeah, I really the only thing that scared me off about him was that fragile tag. I like everything else about his profile, the advanced movement, the potential pitch mix. Even if the changeup sputters a little bit, having that slider so far along is really good. You know, doesn't have any elite pitch. You know, I have the highest being the fastball at 65 potential, but looks extremely solid. Tons of things to like about him in terms, especially how far developed he is as a high schooler. So, like the pick. Hope he stays healthy, but I think it's a good one here.
Yeah, just got to take guys like that if you're going to develop aces, and those a lot of times guys like that are the type that develop into aces. They're pretty far away, but nice like four pitch mix, four plus pitches, and the 45 fastballs. One of my favorite things to have in the low minors. When you have that good of a fastball at that young level, usually means you can just at least strike guys out right away at the low levels. A lot of guys have like 35, 40 fastballs and not quite as can't maybe their striker percentage is like 13, 14 at the low levels. Their pitches aren't developed, but when you have a guy with some good movement and that good of a fastball, it's actually a pretty good indicator of early success. So we'll see if he can go into the minors and have pretty good success early on. Next up, we have the Spiders taking a nice two-way player and Mike Dickey. Mike Dickey, I know he from talking to you, he was right near the top of both of our draft boards for where we picked in the middle of the first round. We both passed on him, but barely. I think he was a pretty strong consideration for both of us. Pretty elite corner bat contact out of him.
Yeah, you know, he was definitely in the running at my pick. He was a guy I looked at a couple of times, especially with the very low demand on him. A lot of things to like there, in particular from the hitting side of things. That high contact potential matched with, for me, 60 potential power. In what should be a good defender too, with 60 range and 65 arm in right field. The pitching side of things could be solid. You know, I wouldn't expect too much. You know, with the 20 current movement and 20 current control for me, I would have taken him here just based purely off the bat. But that's a nice plus if that happens to develop. So, couldn't believe he actually slipped this far and think it's a good pick for the Spiders.
Yeah, I don't think it's too crazy to think he could develop into a center fielder one day. 60 range, 65 arm. All it would take really is a little bit of range bump, and I think he could pull off center, which would be crazy with that bat. So another reason why his potential so high. I agree. I think he's pretty much a full hitter with how I looked at him, but that 80 changeup really jumps off the page. Like you said, it's super raw, like current ratings. Not nearly as developed as a pitcher, but when you see an 80 and a couple good signs in the pitching categories, like there is a world where he could develop into a really good pitcher. I think if he can just get that control and movement. But yeah, I think if I had to like separate him, I'd probably say he's like a top 20 pick as a corner outfielder, and then maybe like a 6th round pick as a high school guy, just with his current profile. If you had him separate, so to get both those guys in one is pretty nice value. And like you said, the bonus there's a little flaw in the game where if they're a two-way guy and listed at the position they're not quite as good at, it gives them the bonus based on the projection at like pitcher. So it's like kind of give I think that bonus based on the fact he's probably like a 5th or 6th round pick pitcher instead of having like a probably would be like a $4 million bonus if he was just an outfielder. So really good value there with the bonus demand. Next up, we have Omar Serrano going to the Braves here. Omar Serrano is at our third catcher off the board, which I think might have been one of the first time that's happened. I'd have to look back, probably the history of FTD, three catchers going top 25. What do you think about Serrano?
Yeah, some of the best senior year numbers of any of the guys in this class that we had. 3.4 WAR from him senior year. Really good offensive profile. Solid enough ability with the 55 ability and 65 arm for me behind the plate. Line drive hitter out of a catcher. You know, specifically the pop, right? 65 potential gap for me and 55 potential home run. Should hit the ball great. I think it's a extremely solid pick here. He wasn't quite in the consideration for me at mine, but very next on the horizon for me. So I think it's good value here.
Yeah, I really like to see a catcher that's athletic too, with the 40 and 45s. A lot of catchers in baseball have 20 and 25 in the athleticism rating. So seeing the 45 base running, it's actually a big plus for me at that position. Yeah, really, really crazy. I have a 40 catcher defense on him already, so should be real nice. Kind of reminds me of like Herrera a little bit, the St. Louis Cards catcher that went over to Washington this year. Just a nice bat, really nice defense, solid athlete, just a really good all around catcher. So probably just yeah, probably one of the best ISO hitters in the draft there. Isolated power with the high gap power and the high home run power. So really, really nice pop out of a catcher for sure. I love that profile. Next up, we have Eric Slack. Eric is the guy. I'm trying to remember which guy this was. Actually, kind of forget. Oh, okay, yeah. So this was kind of a safe center fielder. One of the few middle fielder guys that have gone high in this draft. Not too many shortstop and center fielders. What do you think about Eric Slack? I see a nice 80 in that profile.
Yeah, about as we were laughing about the supplemental pick the Pirates make, but it fits that. It's the most piratey pirate guy of all time, right? With this high contact, high void, good athlete, good personality. They have a type and they pick them well. You know, 55 current gap out of a high schooler is crazy. The potential of 80 avoid K is going to be, you know, hit for contact for sure. Now the 25-60 home run power will be the interesting thing to see if he's just solid or if he's really, really good. So that coming along will be the big thing, but a great personality, right? Hard worker. So that should be a thing. I know OSA has 65 range on him. I just have 60, so I think that might be a little determining factor if he can get away with center field or if he's kind of restricted to being a good defensive left fielder. But a lot of things to like about him, and he fits their mold perfectly.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. Exactly what you said. That super safe pick. With the good defense and the good contact, two of the safer things to have. And like you said, the ceiling could really change depending on the power and the fact that if he could actually play center field. I have a 65 range on him, so yeah, it's kind of iffy probably in the middle there. But yeah, as an 18-year-old, the range can go up. So he really his ceiling could change tremendously based on the fact if he could get anywhere close to that 50 power, and his range could turn into ability to play center field. But Pittsburgh's outfield's so big, you really do need almost a second center fielder out there in left field. So if he could play left field with 60 or 65 range, he'd still be pretty valuable defensively. So just a really nice pick. That one of the best contact hitters in the draft. That yeah, his ceiling could go way up depending if that power is legit or not. Next up, we have Steve Gaither going to the Cardinals. Gaither has one of the biggest bats in the draft. What do you think about Gaither?
Yeah, he was easily a top 10 bat for me in the draft. Some just crazy offensive numbers in high school. The issue is he's almost relegated to a pure DH. You know, maybe some slight jumps in the defensive profile, and he could turn into a first baseman, but not particularly strong there ever. But 65 potential contact, 70 potential power for me. So big time potential of this bat. Going to take a bit to develop in terms of an offensive threat, but if this pans out, it's a DH for 10 years there for the Cardinals.
Yeah, not like the sexiest pick in the world, but just one of those picks you got to make. You got to get good bats in your system. So obviously, everyone likes to get those, five tool guys or really good defenders. But at the end of the day, when the bat's this good, you just it's just a huge plus. And it's clear that he's going to have a lot of gap power and home run power and contact. It's just question of if he gets from good to really good, it's just, yeah, if he gets the patience stuff. The eye is really low, but the high ceiling. So it really just comes down to if he gets that eye or not. If he develops into an absolute stud, that 30-50 is really nice out of the Void K. I really like that with those big power bats. The guy has really high gap and home run power. A lot of those guys in the pros have like 35 Void K in the real life. They have like those 30% strikeout rates. So 30-50 is actually real nice from an 18-year-old. So guy that yeah, just has that nice safe profile. You just really want to keep an eye on that eye, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. Next up, we have Dave Robinson from the Dodgers. Another arm here going, another high school arm. What do you think about Dave Robinson's profile?
Yeah, this the potential here is pretty immense for Robinson. I have 75 potential control with 65 potential movement, a stuff rating that you think would grow as he continues to add some velo. It probably shows my ignorance about the game. I'm just not sure what a fastball sinker splitter would look like and how that is, how that's translated to the game, because I have none of his pitches being particularly good. That 65 fastball, with which is a 45 current, being the highest. But then they're kind of iterations of a fastball as those other two pitches. So not exactly sure how that works as a skill mix, but in terms of ratings and everything, it is elite, elite. So be interested to see and watch him pitch and develop.
Yeah, really similar profile to Catalano. Both high bonus guys, both high school lefties, and both have the pretty good fastballs with the questionable second and third pitches. Really, just those guys. Yeah, it comes down like those high school guys can change so much. Like who knows, maybe that 20-40 changeup turns legit one day. But they're just so far off their ceilings. You just yeah, you just pay a bunch of money for them based on their potential and just disappear. Close your eyes and just hope in 3 or 4 years they're in high A and double A and kind of turned into something. But the nice thing about those lefties though is as risky as they seem, they're still lefties, so that they always have the ability to, worst case scenario, even if they don't turn out nearly as good as their ceilings, to be solid lefty bullpen pieces. So there's always that with those two guys, which I kind of like. So it's not as
Tiny,
ridiculous for
tiny
risk.
little guy too.
Yeah, 5'8". That's crazy. I actually list him at 5'7" on the website. For some reason, I don't understand that on Stats Plus. Everyone's listed as like an inch shorter than they are in game, so it's really strange. So he's like literally listed at like 5'7", 145, like my grade 9 size. All right, next up we have Philadelphia Phillies going back, kind of like a Gaither pick from the Cardinals before, big time bat out of Dan Beeford.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Kind of the same thing, right? I have 60s for contact, gap, and power, so the guy's gonna hit the ball hard. And the currents are awesome for a high school bat. I have everything in the current profile graded out as 30 or better. So that's a guy who's going to get off to a hot start in rookie ball. You would have to think. Can't really play. Could maybe get away with a first base. I don't know. He's pretty much more of a DH for me, so that kind of limits him there. But gotta love the bat potential for him. And I think he could be a good pick as a guy who's pretty far along for a high schooler.
Yeah, exactly. Like we were just saying, pretty much the exact same profile as Gaither there. Really just a lefty bat that looks like he has a little bit of split difference, so should really crush righties. And yeah, just the same as Gaither. Really just same thing. You throw him in rookie ball for a couple years and just hope he develops the eye and avoid K. And looks like he clearly has the gap power and the contact are really high. So you just hope he's a guy that just develops into a masher. And you just those guys really help. Next up, we have Nelson Hinojas. This guy has a really cool name. Let me try to spell it out here. I messed it up. What can you tell me about this profile?
Yeah, he was one of the most interesting players in the draft to me. I like that the batted profile is spray for both ground ball and fly ball. The most interesting thing is I think he almost fits best as like a second baseman with his 65 range for me on the infield. The rest isn't great in terms of error and the turn double play, but with just 60 outfield range for me, and maybe it's more for others, I don't think he can quite play center field, especially in a place like Colorado. So like him a lot, especially if he starts to get to these currents, or these potentials with 60 contact and 55 power for me. Could be a real threat that could play a high priority position in second base.
Wow, I am shocked when you talk about that range. I just clicked on the OSA. They have 50 range on them, and I have 60. I don't think I've ever seen an OSA jump of 10 range before. That's so strange. I've seen some major differences on the bat side, but I don't think I've ever noticed a guy with that different of a profile. I don't know what caused that. That's crazy. So that is shocking. So yeah, it definitely looks like from the OSA's point of view, they have him as a second baseman with 65 range in the infield stays the same, but I have a 10 difference. Do you have that too?
Yep, I have that as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, actually, OSA is the same. That is so strange. But yeah, really nice. 30-65 contact really jumps off the page at me from an 18-year-old. That's just a guy that can play the middle of the field with that kind of contact. That's just awesome. So you can never go wrong with that. Next up, we have Dan Kreidel. This is another high school huge bonus pitcher. This guy, all five of these guys are pretty much the same. Kind of like just another lefty, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah, and kind of the opposite. He's a big old boy at 6'6", 200. Love the five pitches he has in the profile. The high movement as well as the pretty far along stuff at 35 currently. Throwing 95 as a high schooler definitely helps that. So be interesting to see the secondary stuff develop, the curveball and the changeup. But with how far along the fastball, slider, and forkball already, he's pretty much locked in as a starter. Don't particularly love the dip in numbers his senior year, but that could be a lot of different things. So think he's going to be at worst a really solid middle of the rotation piece, but like the pick here late in the first round.
Yeah, that bonus is terrifying. 10.5 million, the highest in the draft. I think I don't know my Montreal's financials especially, but they're a team that has a lot of young guys that haven't got paid a ton yet on the books that are in their rookie contracts, and he's made the playoffs multiple years in a row. So I'd imagine the financials are looking pretty solid there. So you might actually be able to afford the 10 million. I don't think many teams could. That's a lot of money for one player in the draft, but probably the ceiling there if he ends up being he'll could be well worth it one day if he develops anywhere close to those ceilings, if he can get to like 60 70 movement or 60 control. So a really nice set of lefties here going in the first round. A lot of high school arms here. Lucas Sizemore is the next pick going to the Brewers. I think he was one of the name changes. He's the son of Grady Sizemore. What do you think about that profile? Nice balanced one, I'd say.
Yeah, he is. It's a very intriguing one to me. We see the high I again. It's 25-70 for me with the good potential contact. So I think at worst he's going to be an on base machine with the 60 range for me. Now, not OSA has 60 as well, so he's pretty much relegated to being a good defensive left fielder with the kind of a lackluster arm there. Big jump in numbers his senior year in high school. A couple of issues are the personality isn't great. He is high intelligence, which is nice, but the low work ethic isn't particularly great. And the on the athleticism side, that high aggressive, 65 speed coupled with the low base running isn't particularly something I love to see. But shoot, if he hits those bat potentials, it doesn't matter what he's doing on the base paths. He could be a real impact bat.
Yeah, and I noticed too the OSA is crazy high on his bat. The OSA's got, I know they're pretty high on everybody sometimes, but really, really high. 70 contacts, 65 power, 65 eye. Essentially, if you're just going by OSA rankings, you'd have to think he's like a top 10 player in the draft just because that bat's so outrageous with a pretty good rangy guy out there. So really interesting if my scout's wrong or maybe the OSA's right. We'll see. But yeah, you can never go wrong with a high school guy that good of a bat with that 60 range is always a good combination. Another high school outfielder here going to the Astros, Sam Downey.
Yeah, Downey to start our supplemental picks here is a pretty good pick, I think, for the Astros. They got the first pick coming up there, and with 60 potential power as a guy who now I don't know if he'll end up there, but grades out as an 81st baseman as he's 6'6" for me. Um, it'll be interesting to see where he plays. He kind of feels like a right fielder with that big arm out there, but has some potential in the infield. Maybe if he gets a little more arm, could play some third base, could maybe play some second base. So kind of an interesting util guy. Very very raw. Everything's 30 or below for me in terms of the currents, but if it develops into the 60 power, I think he could be a good pick here.
Yeah, I love those utility guys that can play a bunch of different spots that have the high intelligence. I think that's the most important thing for learning a new position is the intelligence. I've noticed the guys that have high intelligence can really pick up new positions quicker than the other guys. The work ethic intelligence in particular. So nice to see that. And yeah, pretty monstrous arm out in right field there with a 70 that could probably turn into a 75 or 80 one day. So just big time potential with some minor flaws like the extreme pull and stuff. But yeah, really big time ceiling. And I think that was the one that Jason mentioned in the chat, the San Diego GM, that his scout was like ridiculously high on him. Didn't he have like 75 power on him or something? So if his scout's right, this guy might be one of the best players from the draft. That's a monster ceiling. All right, next up we have an finally I think we're going back to the college side of things. So I think we had all high school picks all the way from 18 down to 33. So that's a crazy run on pure high school guys, not a single college guy taken until Pat here going to Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah, the preacher. One of the at 22 already, one of the older guys that we've seen picked. Obviously, there haven't been many college ones. He might be the oldest so far, but big time contact gap power bat. I have 65s on both, and the rest of the profile looks pretty solid. Should play a good enough second base, with 55 range and 55 turn for me. Um, Looks extreme. He came out on my report as one of the most developed and far along guys, so it feels extremely safe here. It's a guy you could eventually just plug in pretty easily at second base, and just have some really good hit potential there. So like that he's a switch hitter, adds things from both sides, and yeah, good solid pick here.
Yeah, it's just another one of those guys that like about four or five different guys in this draft that have had like that 25 power with a 45 to 50 potential. So those guys, yeah, it's just really it just comes down to if they can develop some home run power. But he has so much gap that even without home run power, he should be able to hit well enough to hit a little bit better than just be a singles hitter. 55-70 gap out of a switch hitter is phenomenal. That's just the type of guy that can go in and hit like 30, 35 doubles a year. So even if he never gets that home run power, he should be enough of an impact bat to be better than like a number nine hitter. So I really like that. And I don't think the 30 arm kills you too much at second base. Something about me, I really like to see the 35 instead of 30. I think it's just the mentally seeing the orange instead of the red just feels a lot better. But I really just don't think it matters much at second base. And there's just a really short throw over there. And there's been a lot of real life guys that have 30 arms that have been really successful there, like Dustin Pedroia and stuff. So just really cool profile. There's not too many guys in the draft that's 65-70 with contact and gap power, so it's a nice little combination there. Next up, we have Bob Davila. Bob, actually, I don't know how. I think we'll might actually call it there. I think I've kind of forgotten. I don't know if we're going to go into these comp picks. So let's actually call it episode there, or else we'll just keep going and talk about these guys all day. So pretty nice first round so far. I know that top half was really full of stud bats and high school guys, and then the second half was just pure high school guys. A couple more of those corner bats going with a 65 power. So, but there's still some nice high school pitchers going there, but a ridiculously high slanted towards the high school guys there. I think only like five college guys went in that entire first round. So this draft was just full of high ceiling young guys. We'll see some of these guys just based off that will probably turn into real big stars, and there'll probably be a few more busts than normal just based off those stats. Or anything else you want to add to that first round recap?
No, yeah, it felt like it fell off pretty quickly around the middle of the draft there. The last kind of high crazy potential guy I think was Barrios, and I think maybe Mike Dickey fits into that as well. But I think the second half, some of those big potential arms got picked. And I think they'll come out pretty high. Even guys that went down in the supplemental like Steve Owens, really high potential arms with those big bonuses. So going to be interesting to see how this class pans out. Still, very excited about the top half, the White Sox pairing. Going Blankenship into Lambert. I think they've nailed their last two first overall picks. So, very excited to see how these guys get going.
Yeah, that was a really fun recap. Hope you guys enjoyed. And one final thing, I'd say I just can't get over how much I like some of those bats at the top there. I think really excited to see, yeah, Lambert and Holloway in specific. I think those guys can turn into absolute studs. And I don't think I mentioned it when we were doing our episode, but I actually think I had another jump on Holloway's turn double play since the last draft. I think or the OSA has it at 55. And the more I looked at him, I really think there's actually a world where he turns into a pretty legitimate shortstop. So I realized looking at that there is a real decent chance that Holloway just becomes a mega star. But really, yeah, it really has to come down to that power. But I just thought I'd add that on. I just part of me was really excited looking at his profile. I just can't get over how much I like him. But probably my favorite player from the first round. But yeah, that'll be it. So thanks for joining us, guys. Cheers.